For the Conservatives, Mr. Kurek. For 5 minutes, please, Mr. Kurek.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. You talked a lot about trust and relying on the facts, and it is a fact that there were significant job cuts at CBC. In fact, cuts that were made just before Christmas. It is a fact that performance pay bonuses were awarded very generously to the tune of more than $18 million. And to reconcile that with your testimony here today is quite something. So we did do some digging into these KPIs, the key performance indicators, and some of the targets. And you talked in your previous testimony before this committee a lot about a process. But what I find very interesting is that it's only the reports that come out of the CBC and where they fan over how great you're doing. To the tune of maybe the only place that you'd be more popular than that is at a Liberal cabinet meeting. But even today, you suggested that we shouldn't, to one of Mr. Cotto's questions, you said that you needed to be realistic in that. So these KPIs, this year, or this past fiscal year, you said your own metrics say you met 13 of the 14 performance targets, a massive increase from only meeting 3 of the 14 targets the previous year. Something doesn't smell right with that. When it comes to the actual meeting targets, tangible, we started going through some of that information, and you lowered the KPIs for this past year, some of them quite significantly. Now, Ms. Tate, compared to the previous year, 3 of 14 versus 13 of 14, does that affect bonuses?
Sorry, the years you're referring to? 22, 23, and 23, 24, not 14, correct?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
What was the question?
So in 2022, 2023, you met 3 of 14 KPIs. This last year, you met 13 of 14. Did that affect the bonuses paid out?
Of course it did.
Yet, by your own information, you lowered those KPIs in order to see that they were met. So in other words, what you have stated is that by lowering the KPIs, your organization and those within management are receiving more information. Mr. Goldblum,
could I respond to that?
I'd like to ask, well, I'm just stating the facts, Ms. Tate. Mr. Goldblum, I'm wondering if you could share with this committee.
Excuse me, please.
Point of order.
Yes, Mr.
I really do think if you're making such a grand statement, I think the witness should be able to respond to it. That's just fair.
Thank you, Mr. Cotto. To make that, one cannot make a statement without allowing the witness a chance to respond. So, Ms. Tate, please.
We have a very rigorous process in place for establishing KPIs on an annual basis. We look at previous performance, but most importantly, we look at what's happening in the industry. When you see a trend of 5% decline on television subscription, you don't ignore it. You adjust your KPIs accordingly, and we build in stretch. So what that means is every single KPI is looked at, and by the way, they are not all lowered. They are, in the case of kids, in the case of diversity and representation, there are a number that are higher than the previous year. But just to be clear, we're not making up KPIs. They are based on what is going on in the industry. And I think you've heard on a number of occasions from others that this industry is in decline. It is an extremely challenging time. So how do you manage that, and how do you keep your people motivated to go forward? You build in stretch.
That stretch is a new word, and certainly there seems to be some stretching taking place here. Mr. Goldblum, can you commit to release to this committee the information related to recommendations that you have made for Ms. Tate's bonus and recommendations that you would make to the government when it comes to severance?
As I said before, our communications with the government around the performance recommendations of the CEO, my understanding is that's governed by privacy. So
okay, thank you. I do have one last
question. But I do want to say we will make public
the
report done by the independent organization that's going to look at our compensation, and we'd be pleased to share those recommendations with you.
Thank you. Please do. Ms. Tate, the CBC stopped broadcasting the Calgary Stampede a number of years ago. Why?
I wasn't at the organization at that time, so I can't comment on the specifics of that decision.
Is Western heritage and frontier culture important to the CBC?
Absolutely, it is. Absolutely, it is. It's why we're rolling out more journalist positions in the West disproportionately to anywhere else in the country.
So I want to nail down
Thank you.
specifically.
I
Could you
think, Mr.
provide
Cook,
information related
your
to
5
the
minutes is
specifics
up.
around the Calgary Stampede to this committee, please?
Mr. Ward, for 2 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Il me restait une question.
Thank you,
pour Mme Tate.
Madam Chair. I had one question left that I would like to ask Ms. Tate. I'm coming back to the bonuses.
C'était un choix
Was this a
de la
choice
direction présentée par
made
l'administration
by
de
senior
donner des
management
bonus?
to deliver
Est-ce que
bonuses?
CBC Radio-Canada avait une obligation de donner
Does
des
CBC
bonus,
Radio
ou
Canada have an
avait-il choisi de
obligation
pas en
to
donner?
hand out
Est-ce que
bonuses,
vous
or
avez
can it opt
recommandé
out of
au
this?
conseil
Does it
d'administration
not have to do this?
qu'entériser
Can
la
you
décision de donner des bonus?
turn to the
Ou
board
vous avez
and
dit
ask
carrément
them
de pas en
to
donner? Est-ce que c'était un choix ou une
grant
obligation
this?
de
Was
donner
this
ces
a choice or was it an obligation to provide these bonuses? That is my question.
Je dirais que c'était une obligation.
I would
qu'on
say that it
regarde
was an
l'engagement que nous
obligation
avons pris
when
envers
you
nos
look at
employés,
the
nos
commitment
syndiqués.
we made vis-à-vis our
Comme Madame
non-unionized
Tate a dit,
employees. As Ms. Tate has
fixe
indicated,
des objectifs.
we set
Et on
objectives,
s'attend, les employés s'attendent,
and
si leurs
employees
objectifs sont atteints,
expect that if they
qu'ils
have
vont
reached those
revenir en
objectives,
conséquence.
that
Donc,
they
c'est
will
une
be
obligation
compensated
morale. Il n'y a rien nulle part dans la
concurrently.
réglementation
So it is a moral
qui
obligation, but there
oblige
is
le
nothing
conseil
in the
d'administration de
law
donner un
that compels
C'est un
the
sujet
board
qui
to
est
deliver them.
discutable. Il y a certains
It's
avocats
a
qui nous
debatable
diront
subject.
que oui,
Some
nous avons
lawyers
une
would tell
obligation
us that
légale
yes,
parce
we
que
do
les
have a legal
conditions étaient
obligation
réussies. Mais pour nous,
because the
c'était
conditions have been met.
essentiellement un
But
engagement
we
de
believe that
prendre
this
des
was
engagements
essentially
envers nos employés
a commitment.
syndiqués
We
par
make
des
a
conventions
commitment towards
collectives
our
et envers nos employés non
unionized
syndiqués
employees via the
par les objectifs
collective
qu'on
agreements
souhaitait
and the
quand ils sont
non-unionized
atteints,
employees. It is
ils
through
sont
the objectives
remunérables
that
en
we set, and when these are honored, they are compensated. Thank you.
30 seconds, Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm worried about the CBC. Mr. Goldblum, you know, I think your CEO was blindsided by the decline of trust in the CBC. In fact, she wrote a defensive editorial last year, Toronto Star. I think she's been blindsided by the gathering of momentum that I read, defund the CBC. And now you're going to go to the government on behalf of the board of CBC and give Ms. Tate 2.5 years a bonus. How can you do this?
I'm sorry, I cannot have an answer. I told everyone we have 2 minutes. We've gone over 2 minutes now on this